we start with focus exclusively on using Instagram as a platform to try and find new customers and focusing on these elites. What we didn't actually realize, actually, there's this massive market underneath the train market. People are just doing boxercise classes, boxing fitness classes, doing a boxing technique session twice a week just because they enjoy it and they want to, add something to their arsenal. Now, to target these sorts of guys, Instagram is the wrong platform, right? Because these guys aren't watching necessarily boxing at the weekend. It's just something they're doing, as an additional part of their fitness regime.
I'm Eric Fulweiler, and this is Scratch, bringing you marketing lessons from the leading brands and brains, rewriting the rulebook from scratch for the world of today. Hey everyone, really exciting episode and conversation for you today. This is a brand that has been on our, and specifically Viren's wish list for a long time now. We have Ben Amana, who is the founder and CEO of Boxraw. If you are anywhere near the boxing, MMA, sport fighting world, you know about Boxraw. They are, they've been on the scene for a couple of years now. They are one of the Times 100 fastest growing companies. They have 615,000 followers on Instagram now. They are in 140 countries, and Ben himself has been on the Forbes 30 under 30 list. So they are crushing it and really making waves. And we got to hear the full story straight from Ben. The start of the company, the scale of the company, some of the roller coaster moments that I can definitely relate to as a founder, the ups and the downs, but they are certainly on an up right now. They have some new products, some new collaborations that are coming out. And it was just really interesting to kind of get his perspective on the playbook that got them there and the playbook to the next level. They are all about this kind of concept, and you'll hear it if you listen all the way to the end. Like, my biggest takeaway from this is just kind of sorry to use the pun again, but just like the raw authenticity from Ben about his passion and his vision for this brand. And it's something you just can't replicate. You can try to scale it in a bigger company, but it's really exciting when you get to talk to these challenger brands and hear directly from the founder and just get that energy and that vision and that kind of set of principles about how they're doing what they're doing, which for Ben is clearly about having a very sharp, differentiated, defined mission of why they exist, which is all about helping people fall back in love with boxing. Boxraw is still a small team. I loved hearing about Ben's description of kind of the two people that are producing all this amazing content, particularly on Instagram, but also on YouTube, but also how he's approaching becoming a lifestyle brand, the content that they produce, the community that they're building, and even the mainstream attention that they're getting. One quick anecdote that I thought was pretty cool: they were in the Creed 3 movie and they did not pay for any sponsorship in that. And then the last thing that we talk about is how Ben is thinking about getting Boxraw to the next level, because oftentimes it can be a different playbook to be a successful scale up than to be a successful startup. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Ben Amana of Boxraw. Ben, thank you so much for making the time. I've been looking forward to this one since we had the prep call a couple months ago, and actually since Viren, put you guys on my radar, although I feel like I'm one of the last people in the UK to find out about you, maybe more than a year ago. And I know you've got so much going on in your world that I'm really looking forward to getting into. You're literally jetting around all over the place. So thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you for having me on, man. Looking forward to chatting.
All right. So where are you today? Are you in the UK? I know you were in Turkey, you're going to Pakistan, but you're here in the UK today.
Yeah, I'm in England right now. I'm here for about another week. I actually just booked tickets to go to Saudi next week. I've got 50 tracksuits to deliver. It actually turns out it's much cheaper to get a flight over to Riyadh than it is to ship 50 suits. So yeah, I'm going to drop those off. I'm going to stay there for fight week. Dimitri Bill is fighting, so we've got credentials for the whole fight week and fight night. So I spend, just less than a week there and then get over to Dubai for 3-4 days, see some gyms and some partners, and then back
Amazing.
for about a week before heading to Pakistan.
Yeah, Saudis and Riyadh in particular are really big in the boxing world right now.
They're booming now, man. Yeah. They've taken over, really.
Cool. All right, well, let's get into it. So obviously we're going to talk about Boxraw and what you built, where you're going. But before we do that, the icebreaker question that we ask every guest: what is one challenger brand that you're particularly passionate about right now, and why?
I don't know if you put them into the bracket of challenger. Maybe you would. They're not too well known. There's a company called Satisfy Running. I think what they're doing for the running community is they've just taken a different take on elite level performance gear. And I think also just the marketing, everything they do around the story of a runner. They're taking quite an interesting take, more so around the community and the nuances that I think, typically any runners would understand, which is a lot of the things that I draw on when looking at, boxing, with Boxraw, sort of all around the sort of nuances. I think they're doing cool shit. Yeah, the product speaks for itself.
Yeah. And I was going to say, as you were talking about them, I'm like, that kind of sounds familiar, thinking about the research that we've done and what we've heard from you about what you've done with Boxraw. So that's probably a great segue. So for those who might not yet know, can you give us a quick overview of Boxraw as a business, the products, what's the state of the world for Boxraw right now?
Yeah, we're 7 years, almost 8 years in now. Founded in 2017. The vision is to be the reason why the world got into boxing. Really trying to sort of shift the narrative of what people view boxing as, and show that anybody, age, gender, socio-demographic group, you can take up a sport and it can really impact your life. I suppose the byproduct of the overall vision is we sell right now predominantly boxing apparel, sportswear, lifestyle apparel, boxing equipment. We've also got another venture we've been working on for about 4 years now, called Boxraw Labs, which is in the technology space, using data that we collect on boxers and outputting that to help boxers improve their strategy when they're in camp. And then there's other various products which I can't talk too much about, but where the data can be useful.
That's really cool. I didn't even know you guys were working on that. So kind of collecting data on, do your products actually collect the data, or how does that work?
No, so it's a computer vision model. So purely uses
Got it.
any camera linked to a computer. It could be an iPhone camera, Android, GoPro. We essentially track the biomechanical data, skeletal positioning, every single type of punch, rotation, success, variance of punch, guard, defensive movements, then using machine learning to try and predict certain outputs, to try and devise better strategies. And then again, there's various products past the boxes that we use it for, whether it be broadcasting and so on.
Yeah. And is there anything, I know, kind of the core of the business right now in terms of selling the boxing gear, but also the lifestyle gear and apparel, any kind of stats you can give us on kind of or that you can share publicly on the scale of where you guys are at right now? I know there's some stuff out there about, times 100 fastest growing companies and all that. And of course it's a category with a lot of incumbents that are ripe for disruption. But how have, the last 7 years, if you think about the growth, how kind of has that progressed for you, and where are you at now within the industry with whatever kind of data points you're able to share?
Yeah, we strategically we're not talking now about our revenue figures publicly. What I can tell you is, we had a lot of fast growth for the first 4-5 years. We then had a bit of a dip, and now we're back on track. So we've overtaken that dip, back on track. We've had month-on-month growth since January. We're profitable for the year now, which is a big thing for us. We haven't been profitable really for much of our existence, but yeah, last year was a big reset year for us. A lot of failures, but also with that came a lot of hard learnings and truths, which forced us to reset the business, focus on the things that really we knew we could control. And now we're back on track, and we're up from the year before, up from our biggest peak year. So everything's looking very promising now.
Amazing. Well, glad to hear it. And it is, I think, really exciting, the point of view that you all have as, a business and a brand about kind of reigniting, my words, not yours, of course, this love of boxing. Because one of the things that I really grabbed onto in our briefing conversation is you talked about this concept of boxing as a misunderstood sport. And I'll throw out a quick anecdote from my perspective. Personally, I did, MMA. I didn't do straight boxing, but I've kind of been in that combat sports world in the past. Kind of fell in love with it really for a couple of years, but wouldn't say that I was kind of like an expert on the sport or an avid watcher or anything like that. But the other thing for me is I always think about boxing, because having worked with Gary Vaynerchuk for a long time, he says a lot of things. A couple of the things that he said that stuck in my mind is just how much the world of sport is being disrupted. We sit here in London or New York in the world of 2024, and we think about the major sports that are out there. In America, football, basketball, baseball, hockey. But that's changing. That's being disrupted, right? And it wasn't all that long ago that boxing was the biggest sport in the US or in the world, horse racing, etc. And now, of course, as Rival, studying challenger brands and how categories are being disrupted, we've done a lot on sport. And these challenger sports of Formula E and World Chase Tag, and of course, pickleball. But I thought it was really interesting, this kind of concept of boxing as being misunderstood. And also, I had no idea, and you shared in our prep call, that it's actually the fastest growing sport in the UK over the last few years. So
And
maybe you could just
US,
touch
yeah,
on, and the US as well. Amazing.
yeah.
So can you just touch on, like, maybe a bit of your story, how you kind of identified that as an opportunity? Clearly what you're saying is resonating with people, as we see in the growth of the brand and the business. But how did you come to this perspective of, hey, boxing is misunderstood, the world is gonna fall back in love with this sport at some point? How did you kind of get there?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I think if I think back to, first of all, when I was at university, I started a boxing club when I was there, and by the third year, we grew it to the largest society at the university. We had over 900 members, and I remember, being at Freshers Fair, and then it was just me on this desk and pulling people in, and the way that I was able to sell the sport, and more so once they were able to come to this free taster session, show them the benefits of it, they were instantly hooked. I was doing these taster sessions with 120 people in the class, and instantly, because I understood how to portray the sport, they saw it in a completely different light. So I think that was probably the first time. Um, and then, yeah, later on, it wasn't until 2014, 2015. I was training for a fight. I remember we're running down the street. I was wearing this Adidas tracksuit, and I really wanted people to know that I was training for a fight. But it really then got me thinking that there wasn't any brands that I could wear or buy that would allow me to, show people that I was a boxer. And the more I looked into it, I started to recognize actually there was a big gap in the market for this, and recognizing that every major sport brand started off with a niche sport and slowly branched out. I was like, actually, there's an opportunity here for us. I've been boxing since the age of 12, and I think, going when I first got into boxing, it was off the back of being bullied a lot, getting a lot of gang violence, and boxing for me was, okay, let me try and figure out how to fight. The kids in the street got respected, were either drug dealers, they could fight, or they'd steal. I wasn't interested in drug dealing or stealing, but I was like, okay, learning how to fight would be pretty cool. So I joined the gym, and I think it was myself, just in that, instantly very much recognizing this wasn't just about violence. It was all about community. It taught me about discipline, the community that was around me, love. I had to care for one another, and tradition. I came from a background not so much from home, but from school or from the streets, where I wasn't shown any love. Everyone would judge me based on how much money we had, and we didn't have a lot. Parents moved from India, we came to England when we were age 6. So yeah, I was typically looked as the kid that didn't have a lot. But as boxing in the boxing gym, they didn't care about where you came from, how much you had in the bank. It was more about how much effort you put in there in that moment. So I think, yeah, over the course of the years, I fell in love with the sport, and I realized actually it was completely different to what I thought it was. It taught me to be less violent, less aggressive on the streets. And then, yeah, looking at the success of the brands, Gymshark was probably 4 years old at that point. Seeing what they were able to do, doing a lot more research into the history of Nike, reading the journals from their staff members, you start to recognize actually that every major sports brand started with that niche, and actually what made it key was how they were able to tell the story of the sport. Like you look 60 years ago, 65 years ago, the notion of running in the street was unheard of. And what happened, Nike came along and they popularized it by partnering with elite level champions, track athletes, and they brought it into the mainstream. They were able to show the lifestyle element around that brand. Same thing with yoga, Lululemon, right? 25 years ago, it was just yogis in India doing yoga. What happened is they found this community out of Vancouver, partnered with them, and slowly built out this brand. And, same for Gymshark in the gym and lifting. 15 years ago, lifting weights was just, bodybuilders like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And what happened, they came in and reduced the barriers to entry, made it a lot more accessible, especially for women. And it's very much, I think, the motive for me. I recognize that you don't need to compete, to get all the benefits from boxing. I've stopped competing now, but I still box 3 times a week, 4 times a week, and I'm loving it. It empowers it makes me more confident. My body feels better. My mind feels clearer. So I think there's a lot of work to be done still for, which is our role, right? We're trying to change that narrative of the sport, whereby people don't just look at it as it's just 2 guys or 2 girls getting in the ring trying to take each other's heads off. Actually, there's more to it than that.
And that certainly comes across if you look at your website. I spent a lot of time on your Instagram as well. And I think that there's kind of 2 things that really stand out to me. One, you have a very clear point of view on the sport that, again, like I'm not an everyday consumer. I don't box anymore. I don't necessarily watch it, but it does seem very differentiated. And then two, the quality of the storytelling and just the content that you put out. This is not just, you filming somebody and saying, hey, say something to the camera. There's a certain level of craft that goes into the storytelling as well. So I'd just be curious, what was the process, or maybe it was just organic and it just kind of felt natural, but how did you get to a place where you have a clear story and you are producing content that is kind of at that high craft level?
It's quite easy, right? Boxing there's so many nuances to it, and it really is a metaphor for life, right? I think out of every sport, maybe I'm biased here, but there's so many cool stories within boxing, and the very notion of going through a training camp, the very notion of trying to fight somebody in the ring, there's so many sort of tangent stories that can come off the back of that, which makes storytelling super super easy. I imagine it would probably be harder for, I don't know. I don't want to say running, because I run a lot, and I think actually there's some cool stories to be told there. But I don't know. I just think there's so much. It's easy, It's easy. I've been doing this thing since I was 12 years old. I'm 33 years old now. I think the people we get to work with, we have the opportunity to work with, they have great stories in and within themselves, And I come back to that point. Boxing is a metaphor for life. Everyone can relate to the idea of a fight. Since you're in school, the number one thing that people get attracted to on a playground is two people fighting, right? So everyone can always draw on that. So I think it's very relatable, that internal struggle, the fight, the idea of discipline, the idea of mindfulness, which is all like core tenets of the sport of boxing. In terms of the quality content, I think it's happened organically, right? We do everything in house. We don't outsource, any creators. We've literally got a 2-man team, one photographer, one videographer. We handle everything amongst ourselves, plus 2 interns. We've invested in the correct camera equipment. I wish I had, some cool tips and tricks to say this is how we do it, but yeah, we're just a group of hustlers.
Yeah,
we just try.
But I think that's something that I certainly take away from that answer, and I think people listening can as well. That I'll just underline is like, it doesn't have to be that complicated. You can put out really compelling, differentiated, high quality content if you get, and I would imagine those 2 people that you have are not just anybody; they're probably really good.
Yeah. Right.
So the quality of the talent matters as much as, hey, what's the role that you hire for, and how do you structure your team? But it's not that, in the world of today, in the world of 2024, you can find these people out there, the videographer, the photographer, someone who's probably passionate about what your brand and business is passionate about as well, who can come in and turn out a lot of high quality content if you're able to give them a clear, compelling kind of platform to do so. And I would imagine the support and autonomy to be able to go do the craft of what they do. So that's kind of what it's funny, because it's like, I kind of expected that would be the answer, as opposed to, well, we have a monthly editorial meeting and every Thursday we do this, that it is a little bit more organic. And you probably do have some of that process as well. But the, I guess, passion that comes through the brand, getting the right talent on board and not overcomplicating it, I think is actually a really interesting, way to approach it.
Yeah, I think another big difference of how we approach content creation compared to probably, I imagine, a lot of other brands do. A lot of brands will put a lot of time into the pre-production. They'll come up with this big plan of, this is what we're going to execute. We don't have a plan when we go and shoot. We shoot everything raw. So when we're with these boxes, all the content you see, nothing is staged. Everything you see is actually from a training camp. And what happens afterwards, obviously, if we've done an interview with the boxer, then they'll typically give us a storyline to follow, and we'll chop and change based on the audio they give us. Or what will happen is, and typically this will happen from me, from journaling, there'll be something that I'll be overcoming, or like a mindset thing that I'm going through, or some sort of problem or thing that I think could be helpful, and we'll try and build a narrative around that, and then we'll piece together cool content that we've got from these boxers in camp. And always any of the struggles that we're going through, things that we want to, or how we want to help inspire people, we'll be able to find some cool segments from the content we've shot raw, to fit into that audio.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, just thinking about what you said a couple times about like boxing as a metaphor for life, you're literally kind of like crossing those streams. Your personal journey as an entrepreneur, as a professional, as an athlete, and taking that and applying it to kind of the story that you tell as a brand as well. That's super interesting. And, that probably is a good segue into the next topic that I wanted to get your thoughts on. So this idea of a lifestyle brand, It's interesting. Obviously, you've got the numerous examples of brands that have done this successfully, Gymshark being one in the UK that you already mentioned. But even, one of the interviews that we released a couple weeks ago now was with a B2B business, a SaaS technology company. And he was talking about how actually B2B businesses are starting to kind of try to create a lifestyle brand. Much easier said than done. And I would imagine that part of this is going to be, and this is certainly one of the red threads that's starting to come out from me in the conversations and the answers that you're giving, a lot of it is about the authenticity, and it's funny, maybe not funny, but the name of the company is Boxraw. A lot of what I'm getting from you is like, you just have this raw kind of passion and authenticity for the sport and the stories that you want to tell within it, even to the level of how you produce content. You're not kind of staging actors in a ring. It's people actually training. And then you use that to tell the authentic story to your audience. So I'd imagine authenticity is a big part of how you have built a successful lifestyle brand. But what else can you share around whether that was an intentional thing of like, hey, we want to be a lifestyle brand, or if it was a little bit more organic, and what has contributed to Boxraw being able to make that kind of evolution and transition successfully?
Yeah, it happened organically. I can't say it was the plan. When Boxraw was first, it's Boxraw as you know. So for context, Boxraw was actually the name of a previous company that I had. It was the name of it's a white collar boxing show company that I had that we used to do charity events. The thought process for the name actually, it wasn't anything particularly inspiring. I knew I wanted, when someone searched on Google, boxing, my name would then get suggested. So after it suggesting boxing, I was thinking, okay, maybe it might suggest my company. So I was like, okay, first three letters need to be BOX. As I searched it, I was like, okay, I want it to be symmetrical. I need another three-letter words. Raw. Boxraw makes sense. Boxing is raw. And that was it. There was not like multiple attempts at trying to find a name. But when it came to launching Boxraw as you know it, it was very much, the vision wasn't as big as it was now, to be sure. It was boxing clothing. Actually, what happened was I'd created all this clothing and I started to ship it out to boxers, before launch and after launch, and they loved it. But they said it was too nice for them to actually wear in training. They wanted to wear it as a lifestyle piece, more on the streets, which forced me actually to change the narrative of the things I was talking about. So I talked very much around the mindset of a boxer in the ring. I wasn't talking too much around the mindset of a boxer out of the ring, how they go about everyday life. So it actually happened, almost by accident, whereby these guys weren't willing to wear it in training. Therefore, I didn't have enough content to be used for social. So suddenly I have all this content of them on the streets, wearing these tracksuits and t-shirts that I've, built actually for training. Now I have to talk about a lifestyle story. So I kind of fell into it that way. And obviously, over time, very much realized, there's a lot more we can talk about, as boxing as a lifestyle, as opposed to just, within the sport.
Hey everyone, just want to take a quick minute because we've actually heard from many of you that you want to get a better understanding of what it is that we actually do here at Rival. You know us for the content. Obviously, you're listening to Scratch right now, but everything else that we put out, the events, the community, but actually our core business, just so you know, we are a marketing consultancy for challenger brands. We partner with brands big and small to gain category share with a challenger approach. We develop and execute strategies and campaigns across four main areas of the marketing function: brand strategy, creative and production, paid media planning and buying, and customer data and MarTech. And then, of course, as you know, the mission that's wrapped around Rival is to understand and share our learnings about what drives the growth of successful challenger brands. That's it. Sorry for the interruption. I'll let you get back to the show. And so now with your market, well, actually, a quick question. To the extent you can share the business right now between kind of the actual boxing, products, the gloves, the wraps, the things that people are going to use in the ring, versus kind of more the lifestyle products, what's the general skew? And then I would just be curious from a marketing perspective. Yeah, I think I know what the answer is going to be at this point, but I was going to ask, is there kind of a strategy of like how much you want to show up as a lifestyle brand versus a boxing brand? Because I also know like the purity of and the quality of your product is paramount as well. These are not like, these are legit professional best, like these are boxing gloves. Is not a lifestyle company that makes some shitty boxing gloves that people can wear if they want to kind of fool around with it. So how kind of intentional is the breakdown in the marketing between the lifestyle and the product side? And does that reflect the business right now as well?
Yeah, it's. I mean, first of all, actually, clubs haven't launched yet. They've been in development now for 6 years.
Got it. Okay.
Coming on 7 years now. So us, actual product split in terms of the SKUs we have. We only have, I don't know, it's probably 10-20%, equipment versus apparel. And then in terms of the apparel split, it's probably 60% sport, training, 40% lifestyle.
Got it.
Marketing wise, we very much focus on trying to tell the stories in boxing, and that will typically be a mix of both actual boxers in the ring, but also on their journey, on their way, showing lifestyle products. We tend not to, and probably get told off for this, but we tend not to focus the ads too much just around the products. It's very much, we think about the funnel. We try and draw people in first by the stories we can tell. And then, the Facebook guys do their job and they figure out which they're going to be interested in. Is it going to be more training? Is it going to be more lifestyle? Sales splits are probably around 70% training, 30% lifestyle. But with that being said, we've been out of stock. We had a lot of stock issues over the last few years where we didn't invest purposely into lifestyle. Come October, November, we've got some big investments going into lifestyle. And I imagine that will pick up. So up until about 2 years ago, it was around 50-50 split of lifestyle training. Then we had some tough financial issues. We had to make the call, right, focus on training. We cut out lifestyle. Now we're going to bring it back.
I'd be curious because you touched on it, and I think this probably segues into the next chapter of the conversation around how you're starting to get to the next level in the industry, both from a product perspective, but also from a marketing perspective. A lot of what we see, and we actually released some research on this in the past, is challenger brands are able to kind of find arbitrage in the way they go to market based on the channels that they choose to invest in. You mentioned Facebook as a channel that you're on, but for example, we've seen other brands have a lot of success with like connected TV because they're able to show up on the screen in people's house, makes them seem like a bigger brand than they are. We actually call it the pufferfish challenger effect. But I'd be curious, we've talked a lot about kind of the story, the brand, the content. What about the distribution from a marketing side? Is there anything you can share about like how you're prioritizing different channels, if that's something that's kind of factoring into your strategy of how you want to show up right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, right now it's very much just based on cash flow. We're not, this massive brand with loads and loads of cash in the bank that we can afford to be testing different channels. We did it, for the first probably 5 years, we were very much just on everywhere, Snapchat, Pinterest, YouTube, Google, Facebook, Instagram, and then, financial issues hit and we were forced to refocus, which is, again, the best thing to ever happen to us. So now I think I'd probably say we're around 70% of our budget is in Meta, but Instagram primarily there. Then you've got Google, YouTube. We do a little bit on TikTok now, but we cut Snapchat, we cut, what else did we cut? We cut Snapchat, we cut Pinterest. So we're just focusing on those channels right now. But, the goal by, I think, Q2, Q3 next year will be to start expanding those channels after the glove launch, after the boots launch.
Hey everyone, just another quick interruption. If you're listening to this podcast and you're not already part of our AMP community on WhatsApp, would love for you to get involved. So AMP is a community that we started at the beginning of the business, really, just to kind of bring together some of the interesting people that we were talking to, the marketers that we were coming across, many of whom have been on this show as well. And so now AMP is about 300 senior marketers from around the world, from various categories, different stages, challengers, incumbents. And it's really a place where people can share questions, can share resources, can make new connections, can use folks as sounding boards. And for those that are in it, it is a very vibrant community. It's really taken on a life of its own, which is amazing. So if you're listening to this and you want to get involved, please go to our website, wearerival.com. There you can find the application form or reach out to me or someone at Rival directly. Thanks so much. Yeah, so kind of doubling down. That makes sense. And then I know, one of the things I thought was super interesting, if we talk about influencer, right, as a topic, and I know it's different for you all than it might be for other brands at a similar stage in categories like yours. But one, you've got kind of the influencers coming into the boxing world, the Paul brothers, KSI, etc. Two, obviously, the partnerships with boxers is a big part of your strategy and the folks that you kind of have on the Boxraw roster, as it were. But then also, I remember you mentioning in your in our prep call that Boxraw was actually in Creed 3, the movie, and I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, that wasn't a paid endorsement. So there is kind of the influencer, media influencer as a media channel, whether it is an individual like an influencer, a boxer who obviously has influence in this category, or even more mainstream media that you're getting into. So do you think of influencer kind of as a media channel, or how does all of this fit into how you're thinking about building the brand?
Yeah, we don't really touch influencer boxers, to be honest, like the YouTube boxers.
Yeah.
I had a lot of arguments a few years ago when the whole, Paul Brothers came up and KSI, and everyone was like, okay, we need to jump on this, look at their audiences. And I still stand by the decision not to, actively, pursue or work with these guys. They were hitting us, we gifted out gear, we seeded gear across them. The problem is the boxing community are a very proud community, and when this whole influencer craze came about, they hated it, and the boxers hated it. They hated the idea that these guys were coming into the sport and earning more money than them, selling out bigger arenas, with bigger followings and, seemingly doing better in life than they were. Now, I thought it was good for boxing. I thought, more people coming into the sport, it's going to have more eyes on it. But I completely understand. For instance, I won't watch influence boxing. I've watched a few. Sometimes if I'm interested in the individual, I'm keen to see who's going to knock who out. But from a boxing standpoint, purist standpoint, like there's nothing I can watch that these influence boxers doing where I'm like excited by it. And I was keen not to alienate our core audience. Now, core audience are hardcore boxers. These guys. I think the reason why we've got to where we've got to with the brand is because we've been legit boxing. We've been talking about the stories, through the last 200 years of boxing, through our social channels, trying to be informative, educational about how we give information on the sport. To then jump onto the bandwagon of YouTube boxing we would have shot ourselves in the foot. And I think what we're seeing now is almost a decline in the hype around influencer boxing. So I'm glad, that we didn't do that, because now the Saudis' involvement and Turkey's involvement, boxing's back on the up. Fights are being made now that were never being made, before because of whatever political issues in the industry. So yeah, we try not to focus on any influencers. In fact, even when we launched, that there was so much talk about, okay, we should get some influencers on there. But I always saw and always assume that if we were to get these influencers on, I'm not talking about just boxing, influence. I'm talking about, just guys who post photos and tracksuits and stuff. The risk that would be that people would buy the product because that person has influenced them to buy it. But when that influencer then chops and changes with the next brand, we haven't built any brand loyalty with that consumer. And I've seen that now. When I don't want to name any names, of these brands. Because I do feel bad for them now, but they were big, they literally blew up, having all these influencers on there, and now they're nowhere to be seen, or they're very small versions of what they once used to be. It's because there was no longevity in the idea of paying these influencers. Now there are brands, and there will be brands that can get a lot of benefit from an influencer if they embody the same values, and those customers embody the same values. Then they're interchangeable. Things there, but yeah, the idea of just paying someone for influence to me was never an option. With Creed, we didn't have to pay. We were an authentic brand. Like, the reality was that they were portraying the best boxer in the world. Like, who the fuck else were they going to go to? They're not going to go to Everlast. They're not going to go to Lonsdale. There aren't any other brands doing what we're doing in boxing, so it was kind of a no-brainer. They did initially say, "Oh, is there any money for?" I'm like, I said the same thing I just said to you. Who else are you going to go to? You're trying to portray the best boxer in the world. You need this shit. So there's confidence in what we do, right? Yeah, I think that's answers your question.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And you said it again in that answer, but I was already kind of feeling it and thinking it as you were talking. Like, authenticity seems to drive. It almost seems to be kind of the first principle of everything that you're doing. I would be curious just to kind of stay on that topic for a minute, because, a lot of what we see with challenger brands is it can be a different playbook or take different decisions or principles to go from kind of, let's say, 0 to 1 to 1 to 2, right? So if you're very niche, you're very focused, like you are on boxing and kind of, purists, let's say, or real boxers, people that are really into it, not like the guy that's just posting photos on Instagram and wants to kind of fake it. But obviously that is a limited audience and a limited population. If you've got your ambitions, and I'm sure investors on like how you want to grow. Is your thinking that the relentless focus and authenticity on that small group will be enough to scale to a larger market? Or are you not even worried about scaling to a larger market? Or do you think at some point you are going to have to shift the focus or maybe dilute the authenticity a little bit?
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever need to dilute the authenticity. I think if you're looking at, now I'm assuming we're talking about authenticity through our social media platforms, right? Which is, Instagram for us primarily. That will traditionally, I imagine, always remain, centered around and focused around the elites. Now we do some stuff, with people who are just doing boxing for training, but it's different channels, and it's an interesting thing that we kind of fell short with. We start with focus exclusively on using Instagram as a platform to try and find new customers and focusing on these elites. What we didn't actually realize, actually, there's this massive market underneath the train market. People are just doing boxercise classes, boxing fitness classes, doing a boxing technique session twice a week just because they enjoy it and they want to, add something to their arsenal. Now, to target these sorts of guys, Instagram is the wrong platform, right? Because these guys aren't watching necessarily boxing at the weekend. It's just something they're doing, as an additional part of their fitness regime. Actually, what we completely neglected was the boxing gyms, and actually partnering with these gyms in real life. So for the last year or so now, we've been doing a lot of partnerships, collaborations with gyms. We've got a retail store inside of a gym that's just opened a couple of weeks back in Mayfair for the box. These are great avenues now for us to tap into that market and train markets. We think of our market as a triangle, right? You've got to compete at the very top, those who compete, which is obviously very limited, as you said. Underneath that, you've got to train those guys who just and girls who just want to do boxing for the purpose of their mental, physical health. And you got life. So people in time who will associate boxing as a lifestyle, and they want to be part of what boxing represents at the human level. So right now, and historically, we've been focused on the compete market. We can't really say we own the compete market until we have gloves and boots launched. Past that point, the big focus is going to be the train market, but we'll be doing it in authentic ways, so not to diminish the credibility that we've built, from the authentic, elite level boxers. And I think, the same probably happens with most brands. While there is some inclusivity on their page of showing, like, you look at Nike's Instagram, right? It's just purely talking about the elite athlete with a few come-up stories. I think it would probably be the same for us. But there's different ways for us to go after that boxers. We're just talking about one channel there.
So I want to talk about, there's one other kind of fundamental piece to the strategy, at least from an outsider's perspective, that I want to talk about, and that's community. So you've done a few things, given our conversation today. I would imagine these kind of happen organically versus you having some, master plan, and this was like page 7 and it was time to roll it out. But the Run and Sprint Club, the Sparring Club, you're kind of out there a little bit more as a founder, kind of telling your story, being a little bit more the face of the brand, which I know is, a discussion that you had with the team and they were kind of pushing you to do. That seems to be a bigger part of the playbook right now. How does community factor into how you're thinking about building the business and brand?
Yeah, community right now is the number one focus for us. We for the first 6 years of Boxraw's existence, we didn't do anything for the community. And I think it very much came from this internal fear that I had, right? So when I was at university, alongside the boxing club, I had a nightclub promotion company. So we were doing like 6 nights a week. And it made great money, but I hated it. I hated every Monday when I had to start speaking to people, start telling them about the event. And I was suddenly that guy that was going to be like, are you going to be coming to this event? And every time right before the event, there was just this horrible fear, is anyone even going to turn up? And that kind of stuck with me, even with Boxraw, even down to the personal brand standpoint, whereby taking another step back, actually. So before Boxraw, I had a mobile phone app. Started this mobile phone app, which essentially was Instagram stories before Instagram stories came out. And the whole premise was that people were fake online and people put this fake image of themselves up. Therefore, what we wanted to create was an app that you could post something, it would disappear after 24 hours. It would only be viewable around your mutual friends. So I went into Boxraw anyway, after this thing failed, with this idea that I'm going to be completely private. I don't want to be fake online. So 1, I was very private. 2, I was very against the idea of doing any events. And what it meant was that I just focused purely on the online community, nothing in real life. And actually what I came to terms with, early last year, was we need to start actually trying to bring together the actual boxing community. I think it was this fear. Anyone who's in the boxing world knows that boxers, they're the biggest keyboard warriors, boxing fans. They criticize everything that happens in boxing, fighters. Now, fortunately, I've never received any, hate or anything, but I see how they talk about a boxer if he loses a fight, or, a boxer in the run up to a fight. I'm like, these guys are savages. So there's almost like this fear factor of, one, not wanting to host an event or try and bring a community together in case no one turns up. Two, worried that if we do it, they're not going to enjoy it, or they're going to talk shit about it. And three, me put myself out there and people, feeling a type of way, and therefore putting that feeling they have towards me on the brand. I was very much like, okay, if you like the brand, then you're going to like me, and vice versa. So I thought I never needed to put myself out there. But I think seeing the success of other brands and how they've managed to foster communities, I realized actually boxing is one of the most unique communities out there. So if we can own this community in the real life world, then, it will give us the best chance of success. So yeah, last year we launched the first initiative we launched was Spring Club. Spring Club was actually taken from a camp that I went in last year with Terence Crawford, ahead of his fight with Errol Spence. He was literally doing these sprints, and I just followed the same format. I realized actually that a lot of, at least amateur boxers, don't prioritize enough sprinting into their routine. But actually it's, way more important than running, long distance sprinting, being able to go between zone 3 to zone 5, up and down, is fundamental to a boxer, especially at the elite level. So it's very much about bringing the amateur community together, knowing that you're going to push yourself much harder on a sprint than you would, if you were on your own. So Sprint Club launch, I do it every Tuesday. It's a community of amateur boxers in the Coventry area that turn up. Whenever I go to a different city, state, country, I try and, bring together a group of amateur boxers as well to take part in Sprint Club. But actually, the big one for us is Sparring Club. So we had our first Sparring Club event in New York, maybe 2 months back. The whole idea of Sparring Club was that boxers, I witnessed this growing up, as an amateur boxer. You'd box the same people in your gym, week in, week out. And then occasionally what would happen is that a gym from another city would, take a minibus down, you'd spar them, but that would happen once every, 3-4 months, at best. So there's a big issue, within boxing with boxers being able to, spar one another so they can learn. So the idea was simple, just to bring together amateur boxers from, in this instance, it was New York, get them to spar, build a bit of an event around it with, drinks and so on, and community and DJ and whatnot. And yeah, the plan is now to start rolling these out, a lot more locally and, around the world. We launched a collection actually about 2 weeks ago, called Sparring Club. It sold out in 2 days. It was actually the fastest selling and most revenue generating collection of all time for us outside of a collaboration. So yeah, super high hopes for it. And yeah, I think that fear now of the idea of bringing together the community is gone. Now we're just like, let's just get out there.
Yeah. Well, clearly making some waves, because sounds like some of the incumbents you mentioned, Everlast, maybe not in the best light earlier, but they're starting to take notice. I'm just curious, before we kind of wrap up with the lightning round, how are you thinking about that? How are you thinking about, if at all, kind of the incumbents and them picking up on you? And, I don't know what they might be doing out there, but does that factor into what you're looking out for, how you're making decisions?
There's nothing I can learn from them. I've looked at their Instagram account, a couple of times, and people always say, it's just a carbon copy of what we're trying to do, but there's just no backbone to it. There's no realness about it. It's just, yeah, they're trying to do what we do, let them. I've had countless numbers of, members of their team message me, LinkedIn messages, emails, asking for jobs and asking for advice on certain things. And, they got some cool people there, but I just think as a brand, they've sold out, and they literally sold out I don't know how many, maybe 10 years ago, to the Frasers Group, which is, this big conglomerate now, which, yeah, it's got no spirit. It's got no soul.
No authenticity.
Yeah, there's nothing I can really learn from them, and they're not on my radar. I'm in my own lane. As I said, we're trying to bring people into boxing. They're a legacy brand. They'll always be around. Some of the greatest fighters of all time. Wore their brand. At a moment in time. So they'll always be there. But my take on boxing is very different. The path that I'm on is very different. I'm much more future thinking. I'm trying to innovate. I'm trying to make the sport better, make it more accessible, do shit that hasn't been done before. Everything from the apparel to the equipment. Our gloves have been almost 7 years in development now. The technology that we're trying to bring to market. I let them do them, and I'm focused on me.
So what does the end game look like? You're on this path. What's the end? Is there an end?
I don't think there's an end, man. I don't think there's an end. I've people ask me this all the time. What would you be doing if you weren't doing this? And yeah, there's things that if I didn't have Boxraw, yeah, I could be doing other stuff. But I can't see a world where I'll be finished with what I want to achieve with Boxraw. The vision is really the reason why the world got into boxing. And I'm not going to achieve that while I'm still here. And if there was a world where I could see the vision being furthered on without me being there, then maybe I could figure out what the end goal would be. But I can see myself dying with this, and continue with this, until the day I die. I'm trying, I'm doing this with the ambition to turn this into $1 billion company. Yeah, I'm trying to change the sport. I'm trying to be remembered for the brand that really pushed that sport forward, innovated, and made it more accessible. It's some of the happiest moments for me are people that have come from outside of boxing, but then got into boxing, because they've seen an ad or because, they've seen their friend wearing it and learn more about the brand. And for them, it's given them like a badge of pride that they can, shout about. That's the shit that gets me up in the morning. So yeah, to say there's an end goal, assuming assuming that at that point I'm done, no, there's no end goal. I've got multiple goals, things I want to achieve, with the brand personally, but there's no end.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'll just say real quick, we've done, 100 episodes of this podcast, and then I had a different CMO podcast before. And so we have kind of a mix of founders and CMOs at startups and biggest brands in the world, CMOs of biggest brands in the world. There's just no substitute like the kind of energy and passion and authenticity that someone like you brings. It's just a completely different thing. And it takes like a different person, of course, at a different type of company. And it's like a very different job. And like, you're the founder, like, of course you would kind of have that passion and energy, but it is very, no pun intended, raw. So, this was really enjoyable. I appreciate it. Before I let you go, quick lightning round to close us out. 1 2-sentence answers to the following questions. What was the first marketing job, if any, that you ever had?
Marketing, I had a paper round which I got fired from at the age of 11, 12. It's bullshit, man. It was over the Christmas period. I was covering someone, and they gave me the tips. The people I was delivering to. And then when I came back in January, they're like, "Okay, you need to give the tips over." I'm like, "Hell no!" They gave the tips to me. This guy went on holiday. I took the Christmas shift, so they fired me. Apart from that, I worked in the boxing gym from the age of 15 to 18, and then past that, I've only ever worked for myself. Car sales business, import export, mobile phone app. Yeah, I don't know what it's like to work for anyone else. I've never wrote a CV in my life.
What's the best piece of career advice you've ever received?
Control what you can and do the best for the rest.
What is the best brand campaign you've seen recently?
Ooh, that's a good question. There's I can't remember the name of it. There's a brand called Cortez. They did this brand campaign about this jacket, I think the Bolo jacket. I just the way it was shot was quite similar to how we shoot in Raw, with the color grading. But mainly the storyline, so the idea that this kid had this jacket, he's walking through the hood, and these other guys are looking at the jacket, trying to get it off him, and then he suddenly inflates into this massive unit and tells him to fuck off. But I just thought it really encapsulated the culture of UK street culture. There's areas in Coventry you're not going to want to go around, and wear something nice because it will get stolen from you. So I thought that was a really cool play on, the streets, but also linking a cool product into the streets. I thought it was super smart.
Last question. What is one thing people should do differently after listening to this episode?
Give boxing a try. Try it once. Get a boxing session in. You won't regret it.
There you go. All right, Ben. Thank you so much and good luck. We will be rooting for you from the sidelines.
Thank you, my man.
Scratch is a production of Rival. We are a marketing consultancy on a mission to understand what drives the growth of successful challenger brands. Find us online at wearerival.com, LinkedIn, or visit our content hub to listen, read, and watch more of our content and research. Or just drop us a note at media@wearerival.com. We'd love to hear from you.